everyone, and hello, Michael. Thank you for joining me today as we shine a spotlight on some of the important social and ethical issues surrounding genomics. Today, we are joined by Michael Friend, the co-founder of the Minority Coalition for Precision Medicine. So, Michael, if you could just kind of introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about your background.
Well, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Friend. I am the founder of the Minority Coalition for Precision Medicine, excuse me. And it's great to be here. And so the Minority Coalition for Precision Medicine was founded by myself and Shakir Cannon, business partner of mine who recently, a few years ago, passed away from sickle cell disease. And so we're an organization that focuses on engaging the minority community around genomics and really helping to ensure that the African-American community is not left out of the conversation or even some of the latest advances in research.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of good to give people a little bit of kind of a background about you and kind of what your upbringing was like and how you kind of got into this field in the first place. And did you kind of like science growing up as well?
Well, to be honest with you, I grew up in Baltimore, East Baltimore, a few blocks from Johns Hopkins Hospital. And so I would have to say I didn't take much interest in science for the most part, because honestly, I was always afraid. I was having this conversation the other day with someone. I was just kind of afraid of the hospital, of Hopkins. And one of the reasons was we were told that they were doing research there and there were chimpanzees on the roof, right? Or animals on the roof. And so that always kind of bothered me. And so I was always a little nervous about that. So no, I didn't grow up thinking about science. I got involved a little later on in my life due to my ex-wife having sickle cell disease. And so I got involved with sickle cell disease, very much engaging at policy level, and did a lot of work around with institutions, with NIH or White House, and having conversations at that level, and really focus on the issues that surround sickle cell disease patients and emergency room care for the most part.
So what did you kind of do before you set up the Minority Coalition? Like, what kind of work were you doing before that? And then what kind of made you go, okay, no, I'm going to kind of give this up and I'm going to pursue this?
Well, before I was doing this type of work, I was actually doing something just totally opposite. I was involved with real estate. And so I was, we were buying houses, fixing up and selling them. And when the real estate market crashed, and so it was kind of a pivotal moment. My ex-wife at the time was really struggling with sickle cell disease. And so we decided to kind of pivot and focus more on her health and her health outcomes for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, obviously kind of genomics is a really big field, and before it kind of gets implemented into practice, we have to obviously consider kind of public attitudes towards genomics. How do you think attitudes towards kind of healthcare and health equity differ kind of among different groups?
Well, in the, I can say primarily in the Black community, it really ranges in some degree based upon the ages, right? When you talk to older African Americans, when I say older, it could be generally 45 and older for the most part, tend to have a very negative disposition on health care as a whole, right? That particular group remembers or is reminded of Tuskegee and other types of events that have occurred. And so it gets very difficult at that level. And so when you're talking to the younger generation, for the most part, it's sort of a different conversation because they don't have as much history as to what has transpired in the past. And so they're more adapt to kind of take heed to and listen to, like, and be interested in these new technologies such as Crispr, which I have a lot of conversations about. And so you don't get the same conversation depending on just to break it down in terms of the age group. I think it varies tremendously.
How do you think we can kind of like ensure that we acknowledge the past, but also still try to engage, as you said, these kind of older populations who have kind of a negative association towards like kind of healthcare and science?
Well, I think that's very important. I think honestly, the way to do that is to certainly ensure that the institutions in which that are participating in these conversations make sure that you have strong representation from African American institutions. That's very challenging in this era of genomics because a lot of our historically Black colleges and universities have not been engaged in these conversations, right? And so, how do you have the conversation with the older generation or older population when yet the younger population aren't receiving, or those advances that we see primarily at other institutions are not, these conversations are not taking place at the same capacity as the minority serving institutions. And so that's a huge problem.
So the Minority Coalition for Precision Medicine, I'm going to really struggle to say that for the rest of this.
That's okay.
What was it kind of like setting that up, and kind of what is the kind of overall aim of the organization?
Well, it was not hard to set up because it sort of was founded from the President Obama initiative around precision medicine. And so being a part of the initial launch at the White House kind of motivated me to start the organization because it saw such a great need. The aim of the organization, there's several aims we have in particular, but one, I would say, when it comes to community engagement, really strong engagement, meaning making sure we have the right people at the table, the right key stakeholders, and really have strong patient representation as well, right? So we really focus on patient engagement to make sure those voices are included and a part of those conversations. I think that's a very key group, sometimes left out of the conversations.
How do you, sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, how have you kind of like seen it evolve from when it started and kind of now? What kind of has the change been like, and have you seen kind of more interest in kind of other kind of companies wanting to kind of engage with you essentially?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's been very rapid. More recently, it's been very, very much a lot of companies, quite a few have been reaching out. And I would think that has a lot to do with the time we're in. I would look at it in two ways. One, I mean, COVID-19 played a huge part. And the other, I believe, is certainly not totally related to health, but George Floyd. And so there's been a shift in terms of, these companies and their position and their, particularly, I haven't seen this part just yet, but I'm certainly it's to come. But there's going to be hopefully more investments in terms of engagement and collaboration for the most part.
So in the future, we're kind of obviously hoping that genomics does kind of benefit patient lives dramatically. And obviously the aim is to make sure that it is beneficial for everyone. What are some of the kind of challenges that currently exist in terms of trying to ensure that the benefits of genomics are for everyone?
Well, I think the challenges is that where the research and where these breakthroughs are currently taking place, right? And so here again, when you look at where it's coming from, that's a challenge. When particularly, give you an example, Howard University is one of the universities that have a major sickle cell disease clinic or hospital there. But you don't see that type of engagement or that conversation taking place at Howard, even as it relates to Crispr. And so that's one of the areas in which we really got to work on and improving to make sure that, where these technologies are being, where these advances are being made, that this type of resources are being shared amongst these institutions. And so that's a challenge, I would say, for the most part, a very huge challenge.
Yeah, I think kind of for many people, like they don't even pay attention to genomics and they kind of don't understand like the kind of biology behind it and stuff like that. But how can we ensure that we try and kind of increase the accessibility of genomics and how we communicate with people who may not necessarily understand or be interested at all?
Well, I think so awareness is key, right? And I believe that starting the conversations at a much with the younger generations, starting the conversations even at high school level is going to be very critical to how this information shares and how rapidly it can move amongst the community. Because I believe that when you look at the younger generation, they use a total different platforms. They have a lot of technology. They're very technical when it comes to a lot of things, and so. But when you leave all of that, particularly out of a conversation, then you're dealing with a generation who's probably not as rapid, not as advanced, and so it's very important that we engage at a much younger age, I would think, and really start the conversations earlier, so that it can spread, so you can scale more, in particular.
Would you be able to just kind of discuss some of the kind of things that you at the kind of minority coalition are trying to kind of address in terms of engagement?
Absolutely. I think the Minority Coalition for Precision Medicine is really focused on next generation for the most part. So we have a project we're working on called Next Generation Crispr Project, which really deals with high school students. And so we're working with a group out in California. Project is called Ready Made. And so we've already started to bring forth this conversation. And I think the exciting part about working with students in particular is that the way they look at things is not the way we see things. And so it's going to be very interesting to hear their perspective. And more importantly, I mean, they'll even though they're young, they'll be more than likely the group that's really impacted by these new developments and these new breakthroughs. And so let's get them started in the conversation early and let them kind of shape it as we grow and build. And so that's where we're really focused at right now.
Yeah, you mentioned you're kind of doing work on CRISPR, and I saw that you attended the kind of CRISPRCon. Would you ever just kind of discuss that in a bit more detail and kind of the work you're doing in that area?
Absolutely. And so I'm the advisor on the CRISPRCon advisory committee. And so for me, one of the most exciting turn of events was the meeting we had conducted at Howard University. It was, and this was sometime last year. COVID had just started to hit, and we were planning an in-person event at Howard University, and so it was very exciting. But unfortunately, due to COVID, we weren't able to do the in-person, but we did have some incredible virtual conversations, and they're out there online. And so as an organization, we'll continue to focus on those types of conversations at our universities and other institutions. And one of the goals is really to get in, not just on the health side, but to really work on the agriculture side as well. There are a lot of HBCUs that are doing work in agriculture. So I want to ensure that those universities are a part of these conversations and a part of these advances. And hopefully we'll start to see more resources being dedicated to these universities as they start to engage in these conversations.
I mean, CRISPR has kind of like revolutionized the field, and people are obviously very excited in terms of its potential. How do you think that it can kind of act as a kind of a turning point in terms of building trust?
Well, to be honest with you, it could be a game changer. CRISPR doesn't have the history that some other research that has been performed has. And I think that if we start properly with the engagement, start properly with the proper investments, then I think CRISPR can serve as a model for how we should build, how we should collaborate, and how we should engage, and how we should look at equity and all those things that are part of research and a part of these advances that could benefit, the minority community as a whole. And so I see CRISPR as vitally important to these conversations.
Yeah. You work closely with PGED. Would you ever just kind of discuss the kind of relationship that you have with them and how you both kind of support each other, I suppose?
Yeah, certainly. So PGED, one of the most exciting parts of working with PGED is we did start with PGED having these conversations with faith-based community and faith-based leaders. So we had very good conversations there. PGED came to Baltimore a couple times to engage the faith-based community. But I think as we move forward, particularly I'm interested in, we'll be working PGED. They have a huge project around really engaging teachers or schools, right? High schools for the most part. And so I think that in the future, I believe that we'll do some collaboration in that area for sure. That's a huge area.
What has it kind of been like for you kind of interacting with these kind of big companies or like researchers? And have you found like there's kind of a genuine interest in kind of like listening to what you have to say?
Well, I have found that the interest to listen has been genuine, but it kind of may stop there, right? So I think hearing us out is one part, but I think more importantly, it's certainly not up to me at this point to try to fix those problems. I really hope that as these institutions really look to engage the minority community, particularly around genomics, that I hope to see a shift in the way that they engage, right? Oftentimes, as you said, I'll probably repeat a little bit, but as you said, primarily it was me coming in, talking and sharing, right? And I like to continue this conversation. But I think moving forward is more important for the institutions to really do the work, right? And that part is yet to be determined, to be honest with you. We haven't seen it to the degree in which it probably can happen.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's a lot of talk, but not enough action, I suppose.
Yeah, a whole lot of talk, but not action, And action is what? Action is primarily in the area of resources. It's the investments that needs to be made. And so even from that standpoint, we're even as we look at CRISPR, I think we're at ground zero. I mean, we're not there. We're just not. And for the companies that are involved or in these areas, I think they really need to look at where they are, look at their organizations, look at the diversity that already exists, and look at where they need to make steps and changes, because we're still early in the game.
What would you kind of say to those organizations in terms of the people kind of listening to you? What would you say that they need to do now? What a message would you give them to be like, this is what you need to do? These are the next steps, I suppose.
Well, one of the things that we've been wanting to do is one of these organizations to do is when it comes to engagement, right? Let's go back to the faith-based community. Really, if you're going to engage and you really, as an organization, believe that the faith-based community is critical, right? We hear a lot of that, but when it comes to that type of investment, to have a stakeholders meeting of these very influential leaders, there's no investment. And so these pharmaceutical companies or these institutions are not willing, even at the national level, even National Institute of Health, they're not willing to make the investment to have these conversations. And so, when you have these leaders, particularly leading organizations that are, 1 million plus member organizations, and you only want to take the time to really make the investment to bring these folks to the table, to have real engagement, because someone has to pay for it. And so it's not happening, right? So it's a lot easier to go to a local church or some local church and have some local conversation and kind of say, we've engaged. And so that's been the thrust of it thus far. And I think it's inappropriate to have these national initiatives or these international initiatives and have a community conversation at a local level. It's kind of like a joke to some extent. It's a slap in the face, to be honest with you. So I'm hoping that these companies really change their direction and allow us to engage at the proper level, right? Meaning CEO to CEO, right? You're CEO of a pharmaceutical company, then certainly why aren't you talking to the CEO of these faith-based organizations, or vice versa, right? So what we've seen is totally the opposite. We've seen we've seen these companies come in, have these conversations, and they're so localized that they just have absolutely no impact at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Would you ever just kind of discuss in a little bit more detail that kind of faith-based engagement and like kind of how you are using church and faith to kind of educate and raise awareness?
Yeah, well, I've always said this to be clear, and this is true. What do we have in the faith-based communities? You have researchers, you have genetics counselors, you have doctors, you have nurses, right? You have individuals who suffer these conditions. And so when you have all the individuals who generally exist in that pool, why not start there? But here again, if you're going to engage at a level that's not that's appropriate to the organizations, then you're not going to see the benefits. And so there are lots of problems. So I think that what you'll find in faith-based community is everything you're looking for. But at the same time, these churches do not have the resources to, to do the work, right? They're still focused on blood drives and things of that nature. And we've transitioned, not that that's not important, but there's been huge transitions and advancements in genomics, and they're not even aware of what's happening. And so that's a huge problem.
When you've been kind of going to these kind of faith-based communities, what are kind of some of the concerns or experiences of these individuals in relation to when you're trying to engage them? What are their kind of concerns that they've maybe kind of fed back to you?
Well, they've been very clear, crystal clear. Let me tell you what they say. Well, first of all, they're not totally interested to some extent, not interested in working with me. They're not interested in a lot of these companies and what they have to say because they haven't seen the investments necessary to even have these conversations. Give you an example. So if I can bring together 10 faith-based leaders, right? There's 10 national organizations, probably approximately 10 denominations. 10 leaders from those, one from each organization in a round table, $100,000 meeting, right? But here you have the opportunity to approximately talk to 15 million people. So who's going to spend 100,000 to have those conversations? We've been asking every year, right? Every year I've been hoping to get this done. And so to date, we have not been able to find an organization. And we've talked to people that could probably put out that kind of money, but they haven't made the investment. And so as you listen to the faith-based leaders, they can't take these companies serious for the most part, So that's kind of where the conversations are. So they'll send someone to the meeting, but more than likely it's not going to be someone that can really make decisions on behalf of the organizations.
I feel like mistrust is such a kind of a barrier to engagement, particularly with these kind of big organizations, kind of more commercial companies. How do you think that this can be improved from your perspective? Well,
you have to have relationships, you have to have the relationships that I'm kind of leaning towards or sharing about. The relationships between these companies and these CEOs, and not just identifying CEOs, but these folks who make decisions and guide and govern these organizations have to engage these faith-based leaders at the same level. And so that's what we're not seeing. And until you start to see that, then you really can't expect for much to change because it's going to be much of the same conversation. And so once we break that barrier, then you'll start to see some real change and some real developments, because here again, within these faith-based communities, you have a lot of leaders, and some of these leaders serve some of these same universities and institutions. And so there's a lot of layers. And so, you're going to find that there's a lot of connections and synergy when you start to engage at a certain level. And so to date, we haven't seen that happen. And so we're still pushing for that as an organization.
Yeah, You mentioned earlier that you lost your friend and co-founder Shakir Cannon a few years ago to sickle cell. What kind of experience was that like for you, and how has it kind of been like kind of advocating without him?
Well, it's been very difficult, to be honest with you. Shakir was the okay, how can I describe him? Shakir was dynamic, you know, in his ability. One, he was a master administrator. And so, you know, we would envision an event and we'd lay it out together, and he would execute every part of it to make sure that we had the right people there at the right times. And so from the agenda, and so from a pure administrative role, he was that person. And so he was the go-to person. And so not having Shakir around has been terribly difficult. He understood, you know, a lot from policy perspective. You know, he understood, you know, who we were talking to in the room and how those conversations and what the outcomes should be. And so he's been a huge, huge loss personally and to the sickle cell community as a whole.
Kind of looking forward, what are the kind of plans for the Minority Coalition for Precision? Oh my God, can't speak. I can't speak. I'm not saying it anymore. The Minority Coalition. What are the kind of like plans that you're looking forward to?
Well, looking forward is this conversation with young people that we're starting to take on. And so that's going to be a real big deal because we're starting out in California with about 20 plus students that are very interested in CRISPR. And so we're going to grow from one region to the next. And so I believe that those folks will be the voice for CRISPR kind of moving forward. Not the only voice, but one of the main voices for CRISPR and this technology. And to say the least, I think they're going to engage their parents. They're going to engage some of their family members and sort of expand the conversation. So we're really looking forward to what their thoughts are and how they see CRISPR more importantly.
Are there any sort of kind of other organizations or communities that you kind of want to get involved in, kind of not support you, but like support each other, I suppose?
Well, yeah. Well, one of the organizations, I'll tell you, very interesting is the National Academy of Science and Entertainment Exchange. I may have messed up their name, but they are a great partner. And so really looking to work with them more because, you know, when you talk about film, you talk about Hollywood, you talk about what's in the movies, and you talk about what's on these shows. And so I think that one of the well, I won't say I think, but one of the goals is really to engage African-American writers, directors, to really start putting more CRISPR in certain films, or, you know, kind of so that we can become more aware of the technology. And I think that's going to be critical in terms of how we use Hollywood moving forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think obviously like film and that kind of like platform, it is so important to kind of engage people and get people involved in those discussions. So I agree.
Yeah, I think that's going to be critical. Yeah. And so that group, I'll be reaching out to them again soon. We've done some work with them in the past, but I think now it's time to ramp up again. So we're hoping 2022 would be our breakout year.
We're all hoping that.
Yeah.
What are some of the kind of main challenges that you think kind of remain in this field?
So one of the greatest challenges that has been is really funding, right? What I've seen in the past is there's just not enough resources devoted to engagement, community engagement. And so we need to really work with companies to have those budgets increase in that particular area, because it takes a lot of conversations, takes a lot of meetings, take a lot of prep work. And so that's been a hindrance. And so that's an area where organizations need to really do better, I would say, do a lot better.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the challenges, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michael. It's been really interesting. And I think these kind of issues are so important as genomics kind of moves forward and becomes more implemented into obviously care, and also keep up the great work that you're doing at the Minority Coalition for Precision Medicine.
Well, thank you so much, Frontline Genomics, and say hello to Rich.
Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure you check out some of our other videos in our series by subscribing below or going to our website frontlinegenomics.com. I hope you enjoy.